So welcome to the Creating a Custom Learning Portal with Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways. My name is Julie Turner, and I'm with Emily Mancini, my coworker at Praxis Consulting. Just get some logistics out of the way. The SharePoint conference has been renamed to the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, and it's going to be March 23rd and 25th through the 25th, excuse me, next year. So you might want to mark your calendars so that you can join us for that. We definitely want to reach out and thank all of our sponsors. Without them, obviously, we can't put these events on. So we appreciate them and want to give them a shout out. We are raffling away 3 Oculus Quests, which is an all-in-one VR system. And if you visit the vendor booths and submit some answers, you can be entered to win the raffle. And finally, maybe consider donating to one of our charities, the United Way or the International Medical Corps, to help support the global pandemic we have going on right now and support people in need. All right, let's start off by me introducing myself. My name is Julie Turner. I'm a partner CTO with Praxis Consulting. I've been working in SharePoint for quite a while, since the 2007 version. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the Office Apps and Services area since 2017, and I've been a PNP team member for just a little over a year. You can find me, my blog at julieturner.net, and find me on those various social media platforms. Who are you?
My name is Emily Mancini. I'm an architect at Praxis Consulting. I have been working with SharePoint Online since it launched, and I'm an information architect and user experience specialist. I was formerly a Microsoft 365 platform owner and trainer, so a lot of what I'll be talking about today with learning pathways relates to that experience. And you can also find my blog on emilymancini.com, and feel free to always reach out to me on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks, Em. All right, so our agenda for today. We're going to start with going over quickly what learning pathways is. We're also going to dive into how to administrate learning pathways, and then customize the learning content in learning pathways. And then Emily is going to dive deep on surfacing training content in your environment. And that's more the focus of our talk today. We'll definitely go over the basics of administrating and customizing and getting yourself started, but there's longer videos available online on those topics. And so we'll provide links at the end, but we'll only skim the surface of those topics. So just to be aware. Okay, so let's start with what is learning pathways. So learning pathways is a SharePoint online communication site that houses a SharePoint customization in the form of 2 web parts. And those 2 web parts surface content from a GitHub repository that has manifests for content that is provided by support.office.com and docs.microsoft.com. To provision this communication site and get that web part in your tenant, you can use the SharePoint Online Provisioning Service that's provided by the PMP. And you basically go in there, log in, and it's a pretty much a one-click provisioning process to get it into your tenant. Once you have that communication site and it's provisioned in your tenant, you'll be able to then customize the training that is there, making your own training playlists, combining Microsoft training content with your own custom content, and providing a very customized experience. And that content is kept up to date by quarterly drops from Microsoft, where they'll update the various playlists and make sure that the content is moving along with the things that they're putting out. So that's how that goes.
Some of the benefits of using learning pathways is you can create a central location for all Microsoft 365 training content in context of where your end users are already working. This helps to reduce the friction between where people are working and how to get that work done. It can also provide consistency in your organization for where to find this information in a similar format and really help reduce people's time seeking out that content. It gives you the opportunity to provide long-term documentation to support your in-person training. It's really crucial to back up all of your training in multiple formats to support the different learning styles and to have easy reference later on after the training. It can be a mixture of documentation. It could be content written in pages. It could be documents embedded in the pages as well as videos. Even better, if you record some of your training in Microsoft Stream, which I highly recommend, you get automatic closed captioning and translations, and those transcripts are searchable, which is awesome. You have the ability to maybe consider doing some self-service training at your organization, since you have the ability to make different playlists in a specific order with bite-sized chunks of information. You can create a whole curriculum that people can follow, so they don't need to wait for those in-person led sessions. It also helps to reduce the burden on IT to generate all of that training content. You can add additional content owners to Learning Pathways site. You can reference content from other areas of SharePoint, and you can also use all of that incredible content that Microsoft is creating, so you don't need to spend your time documenting how to use the news web part as an example.
All right. So I think we're going to dive into a little bit about administrating learning pathways. So let's start off by just showing what the provisioning service is all about. So we come to the provisioning service, and you saw there that I just clicked on the Microsoft Learning Pathways. And what you then want to do is just review the content over on the left-hand side. It tells you all about the solution and how what's going to happen in your tenant and what's going to be deployed. And then when you're ready, you click the Add to Your Tenant button. And when you click that, you're taken to a page where you can specify some information about how you want it provisioned in your tenant. Now, notice up in the top right corner, there's a I'm logged in as a user, and so that user has to be a global tenant admin to your tenant in order for this service to work. And the reason for that is because it has to reach into your SharePoint site and using a Azure AD app registration, reach into your site and provision the site collection, deploy the web part to your tenant app catalog, and do the setup that's necessary. Some organizations are okay with that, and some organizations are not okay with that. If you're not okay with it for the long term, you can always remove the app registration after you provision. If you're not okay with it at all, you can always go to the GitHub repo for Learning Pathways and provision the solution manually. You won't get the templated pages, but you'll get everything that you need to get Learning Pathways up and running for yourself. So then you provide an email address, and you provide the URL where you want Learning Pathways to be provisioned. And then once you're done, and actually, if it hasn't been changed already, I suggest you change it to M365LP or something else that works for your environment. You click provision. It's going to do some validations of the prerequisites that are necessary, making sure that tenant app catalog was created at least 30 minutes before you tried to do this. And then it'll give you a confirmation screen. And when you go ahead and click confirm, it's going to go ahead and provision into your tenant. It's going to tell you the provisioning has started. And then it's going to show you that it will send you an email to the email address you provided when the provisioning is complete. So you can sit on this page and watch the provisioning happen, or you can just close the browser down and move on and wait till you get the email at your email address. So when it's all complete, if I come over to my mail, I can see that I got the email and I have a button to open the site. So once I open the site, then we can see the fully provisioned Learning Pathways site with all the templated pages. And so now if we go to the home page and we click on Learning Pathways Administration, it's going to load what I like to call the Learning Pathways admin page. It's basically a web part that we call the admin web part that is provisioned onto a single app part page into your site pages library of the site that is your master Learning Pathways site. And that is the place where you will go and administer all the content that the viewers then see. And there's a separate web part for viewing the content. This is for administrating the web part. There's a separate one for viewing the web part. You cannot add the admin web part to any other page in any other site collection. It must be on a page in this site collection, and it doesn't exist in the app catalog or the catalog for adding web parts to the page. So you will not be able to add it any other way than through PowerShell. All right, you're seeing here that we provisioned the site and we went to the admin page for the very first time, and you can see the message up at the top of the screen that says you installed Microsoft 365, whoops, learning pathways. Oh, I moved forward, sorry about that. Anyway, it said that you already provisioned learning pathways, but the web part is out of date, and it provided you a link, and the link takes you here, and so we'll move on. You get to the GitHub repository, and if you scroll down on that landing page, you'll get into a README, and the README has a section in it for showing you how to update the solution. So you go down to the updating the solution section. It's going to tell you what the current release version of the web part is. That's what the drop 3.0.3 means there. It'll say whatever version is the most recent version, and it will give you step-by-step instructions for how to update the web part. So then you navigate to the web part folder and then navigate to custom learning SPPKG. And when you click on that, you're going to get a page that looks like nothing, but it's really the SPPKG file that you can then download to your local machine. So you click on the download button. It downloads the file. And then you're going to navigate in your own tenant to your app catalog. You go to the Apps for SharePoint section, and then you're going to click the Upload button and upload that custom learning SPPKG file. You can see, I just pointed to it, that the version that's already in the tenant app catalog is version 3.0.0.0. So once we click Upload and we choose the file from our downloads folder here, there we go, and we upload it and say deploy, then the version will change on the page. There we go, 3.0.3. I click deploy, and the package is now provisioned. It is a good idea to check the SPPKG file in. That means that if somebody else who's an administrator also comes to your tenant app catalog and they want to back up the file, they can just download it and they'll have the most recent version. Keep in mind that the tenant app catalog is simply a document library, so you want to treat the things in it like a document. So we go in here, we say check in, and we check in the file. And say OK. Very good. Now we're updated. So we go back to our admin web part. And the other thing we do, although not entirely necessary, is you go to the site contents and you will see that Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways is in there. And if we go to details, you're going to see that we have a new version. And so what you want to do is click this Get It button, which will update the manifest in this site collection to the most recent manifest. Now, again, just to explain, unless you're using something called feature deployment, updating this isn't necessary. The newest code that you've already deployed to the tenant app catalog is actually already running. So this is just a step to make sure that everything is up to date. So we do that, and when it's complete, if we go back to our Learning Pathways admin page, once we see it load, you're no longer going to have that header anymore. So there's no header warning you that your web part is out of date. So anytime the web part gets out of date and you come to your admin page, you're going to be notified right away. So the other way to do that, of course, is to follow the GitHub repo, which will also notify you that files have been updated. But this is a nice, simple way to make sure that you're up to date. So the other thing I wanted to show in here is that we have all of these pages sort of already provisioned for you as placeholders to get yourself started. You can jettison any of them, change these menus any way you like to. You really don't have to use anything that we provide you. It's just sort of that way to kind of give you some ideas of how you might want to configure your learning site and get it up to speed for everyone. So now the other thing I want to show you here is also a new feature fairly recently that we added called the Admin Success Center. So basically this is a page that we built that has a video on it that gives you a getting started to learning pathways. It also embeds the viewer web part in here with an Admin Success Center set of playlists. So these are all the things that have changed and are updated and other ways to use learning pathways. And it sort of just gives you that place as an admin to get started. Okay. And so lastly, but not leastly, we'll want to move on to customizing learning content. Okay, so Emily.
Before we dive into Julie showing us how we can administrate on that UI, let's discuss some of the things to consider when you're setting up your Learning Pathways portal. It's really important to know your audience. This is a product platform. Microsoft 365 has a whole suite of solutions for you. It's not just individual tools. So you want to think globally how they interact with each other, but act locally. So if this pre-populated content has some information that you're not ready yet to launch at your organization, you can hide that content. And we do recommend that so you can reduce the cognitive load in your initial stages of either launching all of Microsoft 365 or just learning pathways. Make sure that it's really targeted and focused on the top tasks that your end users need to complete. If the content is very relevant and specific and actionable, then there is a huge draw of what's in it for them to take time out of their already really busy days to go to this site or consume any of this content to help them work better faster. An example of this might be how OneNote helps employees be more productive. It's not just about how to make sections and pages, but how do they use page templates for better meeting coordination. So while you do have some of this pre-populated content, think about how it relates to your organization and put all of that content into context as well. And I will admit, like other humans, I can be a little bit lazy. So having this content here helps shorten that distance and friction. If I'm setting up something, I just recently moved and had to set up my automatic cat feeder, and manual was across the house. I button smashed for a while before I went to look at that training content. So you're giving them the ability to find that information quickly. You're not asking them to cross the house and find that content. So it's more likely that they're going to do it right the first time. So again, shorten that distance, remove that friction to help your end users complete their top tasks by structuring the content in learning pathways to be relevant to them. And with that, Julie, give us a little tour of how we can do that.
I will. How about that? How about I do that? All right, so we have the categories and the subcategories over here on the left, and you can see I'm clicking around in them. And if you want to hide any of this subcategories, you can simply click on the little eyeball and it hides the subcategory and shows it again. You can also hide individual playlists. So if I click on that playlist, it's going to hide that particular playlist. I can also add my own subcategories to any of the categories. So we're in Getting Started, and I'm adding a demo category in Getting Started, but you can add as many subcategories to every category that you want, and you can add them to any of the subcategories. And then just to edit it, you can just edit it again and hit save, and that updates that information. So then we'll show you by pulling down on this list, we'll move to technology. So we made the choice to not only put content in category subcategory structure, but we also tagged all the content with its technology. And so if there's a particular technology that we have, like maybe a particular part of Microsoft Teams, or maybe you don't want anybody using Planner, excuse me, you can go through and hide those technologies too, so that people aren't seeing those particular technologies that you don't want them to see. Sorry about that, I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay. Yeah, see, so some of them have subcategories. So we're just going to hide Microsoft 365 all up and not show that to anyone. All right, so moving back to the categories, I just quickly want to show you under this is a thing called a custom content pack. It's not something we're going to talk about here. There is some documentation on the docs site that I'll show you a link for in a hot second. But if you wanted to make your own set of content for learning, to use Learning Pathways as the vehicle to distribute that content, you could create your own custom content pack. So that's just something to be aware of, but not something I'm going to talk through today, other than to show you that it's simply a matter of getting a base URL to the manifests and putting it in there. And so then the last but not least is this question mark over here. And if you click that, that is going to take you to the docs.microsoft.com site with all of our custom learning of documentation about the custom learning solution. All right. So let's quickly talk about using the administrative UI. Oops, sorry about that.
All right, so as you're gathering this custom training content to add to Learning Pathways as your central repository, just a couple of things to consider. You can add custom assets from other communication sites. Just be careful when you're doing this. You want to make sure that people have access to Learning Pathways and that communication site that you're linking to. One of the great benefits of this is that IT, again, doesn't need to be that support for updated content in Learning Pathways. Let's say we have an HR page with a performance review process, and once they update their page, because that page is linked as a custom asset in Learning Pathways, there's no additional actions for the Learning Pathways site owner to receive that updated content. When you're thinking about who can be your Learning Pathways site owner, also think outside of just IT. It could be someone who's responsible for training in your organization. It could be human resources, corporate communications. You have a lot of different options, and you can have many site owners. Although you do want to be careful, don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. I would recommend keeping it around 3 site owners, though you can have a lot of members who contribute content as well. Start to identify where you can add some of your other custom content from outside of SharePoint to Learning Pathways. You do need to have it be able to load as an iframe. So some pages on docs.microsoft.com, and as Julie mentioned earlier, support.microsoft.com has great content. Just make sure you test all of this content before you launch it. And focus on that task-based structure. So before we were talking about how to make your end user's time worth going to Learning Pathways and learning and consuming this new training content. If you're helping them do their jobs better, faster, then this is really important. So when you're organizing your information with those categories and subcategories that Julie showed us, don't focus on who owns that training content. Focus on the task itself. So for example, I need to purchase something at my organization. And in the beginning of the process, legal handles the whole contract, and then later procurement handles part of the process. I don't need to know that as a site visitor going to Learning Pathways, trying to learn about purchasing. I just need to know the whole process of that purchasing. The different custom assets for getting contract reviews and then entering that purchase order into the system can live on the procurement site and the legal site, where those site owners have access to create and edit that content. But what we're creating in Learning Pathways is that smooth transition and that narrative across all the different departments, where again, that end user doesn't need to know who owns each step. They can just follow that playlist of what happens in order. Make sure you're being clear and targeted for what each of those playlists covers as well. So if I'm going to call a playlist how to purchase goods, let's make sure I cover that whole process. You'll want to follow Nielsen Norman's group's recommendations that a link is a promise, and any broken promise, large or small, chips away at trust and credibility. So people need to trust in your training content that you're adding to Learning Pathways to actually begin using it. Make sure it's up to date. Your categories, subcategories, and playlist titles follow those 4S rules to encourage clicks. They're specific, so no learn more about purchasing at Contoso. Make sure they're sincere. Again, that's that promise that if I'm talking about purchasing, that playlist better cover purchasing, not talk about travel, for example. Make sure they're substantial and they can stand alone. Think about the accessibility of someone with a screen reader scanning all these categories and subcategories. And then make sure they're succinct. So I did just give you 3 requirements of how to structure that link, but also make sure it's only long enough to deliver on those 4. We don't want 3-sentence category titles. So let's take a peek at those custom playlists and assets in an example department site.
All right. So now we're going to get started by taking 6 simple steps here. And we clicked on that link, and now we're going to click copy playlist to make a copy of it. And what happens is we have a copy, and we're going to rename it to welcome to your first week at Acme. And then, oh, let's fix that. And then change the ending here too, so that we're customizing this playlist name to be more in line with our organization. So then we're going to save that and come down here and configure the various assets. So we're going to first start by removing a whole bunch of these because there's a bunch of them that aren't really appropriate for our organization, and so we want to get rid of them. So let me start by removing welcome and the sign in to Office 365. And then we're going to also move create and save and share and collaborate and then try new things. So we're left with work with your team and set up mobile apps. And so now I want to search for a better link for changing your Office 365 password, because that is more relevant to my users because it's going to be the first thing that they have to do. So we're going to search through that and find that we already have that asset as part of our part of the content from Microsoft. So now I just want to move it up so that it's the first thing that the users see in the playlist. Okay, so we have change your Office 365 business password, and now we need to add some other new assets. So first, let's start by adding a new asset that's not already in my content base from Microsoft, but it is a support page. So it's called Enroll Your Mobile Device in Office 365. So we'll put that in as a title, and then I'm going to click on the Enter URL. And so when I click on Enter URL, it's going to be able to put a URL in. So here's the URL that I want to use. It's, you can see right there that's Enroll Your Mobile Device. And so when I load it up, yep, that's the page I want. So let me copy that URL and then come over here, click Enter URL, and then paste the URL in here. Now, that's only part of the job. The other thing we have to do, if you remember seeing the Enroll Your Mobile Device, it had a lot of Chrome around the outside. And since we're going to iframe this document into the page, we need to put some query string parameters on the end. So let me get the query string parameters. And so here we are. We've got embed equals true, and that's the critical one, right? We need to tell it that we're embedding this in an iframe so it knows that it needs to remove some Chrome when it gets iframed into the page. We need the namespace so that we know who's trying to utilize that iframe version of the content and which version of the page we're using, which is always going to be version 1. So once we pasted that in there, then we save the asset and it gets added to the bottom. And now we can add another asset, and this time we're going to do a special create an email signature page. And this time we don't have anything already, so we're going to create our own custom asset. So I'm going to click, create asset page. And when I do that, it's going to create a URL and create a page and open that page. So now I have create an email signature. And I'll come back over here and I'll just save the asset. So that page got created, the asset got created, but nothing is on the page yet because I haven't added anything to it. We'll do that after. But now I need to sort of reorganize what I have here. So I'm going to move my enrolling my mobile device up, and I'm also going to move create an email signature up. So let me move that. There we go. And so now I have my playlist and I'm happy with it, so I can go use it on a different page. So let's close the playlist, and we can see that it's there, and I'm going to hide the other playlist that we made a copy of because I don't want anybody to see the one from Microsoft. I want them only to see my custom one. So now if we come back over to our page that got created for creating an email signature, I can add some custom content to this. So what I'm going to do is edit the page. And just like any other SharePoint page, I'm going to add a section here so that I get a 2-column layout. And then I have some content that's going to go on the left side. It's just some text content. So let me paste that in, and I have a little bit more text content that I want to put below it. So I'll put another text page in there and paste that content in there. And then I'm going to add an embed tag, because I found a YouTube video that would work perfectly to show people how to customize their email signature. So I'm going to paste that in there, and I'm going to save that. So I should point out right now that had you made that video yourself, you could have put it in Stream and then used the Stream web part to embed that Stream video in the page like Emily was discussing earlier. So we'll save as draft, and then we'll publish that page so that it's available to everybody. Perfect. All right, so now, for all intents and purposes, our playlist is ready to go. So now we need to put it somewhere. So now I'm going to navigate to my human resources site. So now I'm no longer in my learning pathways site. I'm in my human resource site, because that's where I think people are going to go consume your first week at Acme. So I made a hero web part. I put the welcome to your first week at Acme on it. And if I click on that page, I'll come to a page that I've sort of started to put together, but now I need my playlist in it that I just created. So I can edit the page. And then if I click on the add a web part here, because I've enabled the learning pathways feature into the app, into the site, I now have that web part. I can then edit the web part, and I can put it in what we call content only mode. So the web part mode, content only mode, means that you remove the top navigation stuff. So the breadcrumb that starts with home, but as you click on things would get bigger, that breadcrumb goes away, plus the search and the copy link button and the administration button, which would only be visible if we were an admin, which I am in this case, so that's why you see it. That all is going to get removed. So I'm going to pick content only, and then I'm also going to filter to a particular playlist and select our Welcome to Acme, First Week at Acme playlist. And when I click apply, now I'm going to filter down, so I'm only looking at the playlist with playlist controls. And so now if I publish this page, we have a really great experience where that playlist is right there in the page, and we can navigate through it by clicking our next buttons, and we can also go full screen if we needed to by clicking the little arrow, expand arrow thing next to the drop down button, and the drop down gives you all the other, you can navigate directly to a particular asset, and like I'm showing you right now, you can maximize the page. So that is really giving you all you need to know about getting started with doing these assets. So,
So before we dive into a couple more scenarios and using those web parts in context, which Julie gave us a great intro in that Acme department site, let's talk a little bit about targeting your communication for your learning pathways launch. So when you're first launching, we talked about focusing on those specific tools and scenarios to help end users do their top tasks, really reducing that information to be specific to what people at your organization need to do and complete each day. What is most impactful right now? So we're prioritizing those smaller chunks of learning. You have the opportunity to meet people where you already know that they're working. Outlook. You know they're in emails, you know they're there for meetings and different things like that all the time. So what you can do is you can create a news digest, which you send from the Learning Pathways site as a roll-up of some of your different news stories to someone's Outlook inbox. So you can pull them to that new site. So let's dive into that. So for News Digest, you'll see on this homepage, once you have at least 4 stories, you'll have See All in the top right. So what you can actually do is pick out different stories that you want to add. So you'll see at the top, click Email News Digest. Select your different stories. They can be non-continuous, so it can be only certain things that you want to highlight. Select Next at the bottom of the page. And name your news digest. This is going to be the subject line of the email, but it'll also be the name of a SharePoint page, because this actually creates a long-term page. It's a great way to capture a moment in time or an issue. So if someone joins after May, they'll actually be able to see all of the May updates from last month. You can enter one person, multiple people, or a distribution list in the top. You can add a custom message, and you can sort these different stories into an order that you would like. And then again, send that out to their email inbox, and you have that SharePoint page as a backup as well. So just to show you where you go to the gear, site contents. We're going to head over to our site pages library. And then you'll see we have a page called May Updates. So if you want, you can also add a link to your homepage to highlight that recent release of everything new that you added to Learning Pathways that month.
Cool.
So now let's head into some of those different scenarios of surfacing your training content in your environment. And the first one we have is a SharePoint champion site. So it really gives you this opportunity to put the learning in context. You can see as I'm scrolling down the page, there's a promo for becoming a SharePoint champion, and then you can navigate between the different roles to change what is surfacing on the page. Continuing down, it's a one-stop shop. This is where people can go, have conversations on Yammer, they can see upcoming events, and then anything in the news promoting what has shifted for our SharePoint environment or the Champions program itself. You can add your governance information that's specific to your organization, any kind of site setup steps that are specific to your company as well, and that Microsoft documentation for web part and site functionality. Because again, you don't need to spend your time creating that documentation. You can use those assets in Learning Pathways. Looking at this page as well, we have the proximity principle, right? So any items that are near each other are perceived as related. So halfway down that page, when we talked about here's how to become a SharePoint champion, and then we had that training immediately on the right, we're showing them this is a self-service option to begin diving in on this content and start working. It gives you the opportunity to support the community that you're creating around Microsoft 365. So if you're trying to build SharePoint champions and self-service and help promote those site owners in your organization, better support equals better content on your intranet. You're helping them create, you're giving them feedback and fostering this community of support. Some of the people that you might be working with were voluntold to do this. This is not their real job. So this is something that feels like an extra part of their day. You can help educate the business on the level of effort it takes to be a site owner. Being a site owner is continual effort with a ton of different capabilities in Microsoft 365 that they're navigating. You can help elevate the importance of this role as a site owner, for how important it is to the organization to have people creating this content all across your intranet. And it's a public area to highlight these site owners' efforts as well. Maybe in the news, you're featuring Site Owner of the Month and having different case studies of how people have been able to be successful champions. So even though the content of this site is not specific to Learning Pathways, you can see how adding it right into the context of this program we're trying to promote really makes it a one-stop shop for people to be able to become site owners. But as an inception as it is to be SharePoint about SharePoint, it's not just that. Let's talk about a different scenario for a department site. So here we have a manufacturing sciences and technology site. It's their team site. And here in featured learning, we have a lot of Excel information. So when I was formerly a platform owner at a biotech, this was one of the top questions that people would ask is about Excel. And you can see here, someone goes to the team site, they can dive right into that content, expand it, click through the playlist, begin consuming that information, close it out, and then on the left, begin navigating to maybe those different worksheets and spreadsheets that they needed that information about to get their job done. So if you have a lot of teams with technical roles, put all that technical information right into the site where they're already working. When you think about how people are working today, we talk a lot about multitasking. Multitasking is truly just serial task switching, unless you're using different resources like your motor versus cognitive abilities. So if you're navigating to another system or searching for help on the internet, that's requiring a lot of usage of your working memory, right? Which is a small capacity and short duration. All that task switching increases stress. So if you're getting rid of that friction of this is where you need to fill out this spreadsheet for this manufacturing sciences technology group, and this is how you do it right here, you're helping them get that task done faster. It's all about putting that training into context where the work is being done. And you're promoting that recognition over recall. It's a lot less mental effort. So often I find for documentation that I create, I end up using it later. You know, I forgot how to do that in Excel, but I know exactly where it is. And I kind of remember that layout of that custom asset that I added. I'll know it when I see it. So I know where to go, and that reduces the stress of me completing that task, even better if it's in the same spot. You can also use it as an opportunity with your teams to have different campaigns for learning each month. If you change that playlist on your homepage, you're promoting raising that baseline of knowledge with your whole team. So if we're talking about adding training information for SharePoint, now we've talked about Microsoft 365 solutions. What about your custom solutions? Let's take a peek at that. So custom solutions, right? Here's a partner order management. We're going to go in and create a quote, and we want to add a quote. And I'm navigating and the partner that I want is not there. Well, if I close out and head home, I can see at the bottom of my homepage, here's some courses, and lo and behold, they're setting up new partners, which is exactly what I needed. Something important to remember about your custom solutions is you can't Google that. People aren't going to be able to find the steps for what they're doing on the internet. So putting this content right on the page helps people understand what can be done, right? You don't want people having to navigate outside of this system. Maybe they have to enter a ticket and then they're waiting in this queue. That's going to create a really poor perception of your solution, as the level of effort to navigate to a new system, open the ticket, wait on a reply, get that reply, creates this mental model for you of how difficult it is to create an order. So if you get some kind of survey or someone asks for your feedback on that new partner order management system, the system might work great, but because your perception of not knowing how to use it and how to navigate around, you're going to say, that system's so difficult to use. I have to open a ticket every single time. I never know how to get my order in correctly. You're helping users understand what actions are possible and what steps are necessary. You're reducing that gulf of execution for them to use these custom solutions. In the example we just had, there was no signifier in the solution that I can add partners. So of course, the best solution would be add a little maybe help icon into your Power App itself, linking to that page, which you've also added as a custom asset to your site. Let's take a peek now on something that has nothing to do with SharePoint or Microsoft 365. So performance management, we're going to the HR site. It's on their homepage. It's that time of year. I have to do the mid-year self-review process, and I can dive right in. So when you're creating this content and adding it to your sites, realize it doesn't have to be Microsoft 365 specific. It can just be a business process, and it can be a business process that you've documented on one of your SharePoint sites. Anytime you can increase the documentations on your intranet and make it easier for people to find that content and that process, you're relying less on those few employees answering those emails to help questions, or again, waiting in that ticket queue like we discussed for the custom solutions. It also helps remove that friction, making it clear and understand the process, right? So performance reviews can be really stressful. So removing that friction to a task increases the likelihood of that completion. Once we have all of this training supported across the organization, that one person who finds that useful is going to tell everybody else. They're going to say, oh, you're having a hard time figuring out how to purchase something at Kintoso? No problem. Go to this playlist and it tells you what you have to do across all the different departments. Think of them as your change agent. So as you're focusing on what to put into your environment, how to organize it, how to sort it, focus on those moments where it can be useful and focused on those top tasks to help your end users get their jobs done better and faster. And then it will organically grow, and your large scale adoption will come from that, of people having this little what's in it for me moments, helping them complete their tasks each day.
Cool. So I think we have some time for Q&A. I haven't seen anything in the chat. So let me quickly move over here and just show the resources. So I said we would share these things. So again, the link for the doc site with the learning pathways documentation on it is there, docs.microsoft.com. The community demo that I mentioned earlier that goes deep dive into learning pathways architectural overview, you can get that at that link, or you can get to the GitHub repo where you would go to submit issues. There's also on that first README that I mentioned where it tells you how to do the solution update. That also has the link for the community demo. And then of course, if you're having issues like something's not working for you, or you can't figure something out, you have a question, you can simply add an issue into that issue list, and we try to answer those as quickly as we possibly can. The link to provision learning pathways using the provisioning service, that's provisioning.sharepointpmp.com. So you can go there to provision SharePoint. I also mentioned that there's the manual deployment option. You can go to the GitHub repo, and if you go into the web part folder where you would go get the SPPKG file that I showed you to update your web part, that README at the root of that tells you how to do the manual deployment, walks you through step by step. It has the PowerShell scripts that you need to run so that you can get learning pathways up and running in your own communication site without having to provision it. And then finally, Emily added this link for SharePoint Online News and the process that she went over for how to create a news digest, which is super helpful.
I have some
Are we going to
questions.
share the slides? Oh, good. We have questions. I love it.
We do. We will share the slides, and one of the questions, this recording will be on YouTube. So I'm just going to hit through a couple of these questions and pass some your way as well, Julie.
Oh, okay, great.
So let's
see
start.
The Q&A, I think, is my
got
problem.
it. I'll be our moderator on that.
I love it.
So we have one from Marcy. We evaluated Learning Portal about 6 months ago. Do you know if there have been any change or feature improvements recently?
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, I think it was only 2 months ago that 3.0.4 came out, but V4, which is the multilingual version, has some enhancements that are coming out, and that should be out in the next few weeks, I would say, for lack of a better, more definite timeline, but next few weeks to a month, version 4, which is also support for multilingual. We fixed some issues with being able to select images for the playlist. Instead of having to have the URL, there's an image picker. There's also then the ability to add an image to the custom subcategories, so that exists now too. And then of course the content updated. So if you just evaluated it and aren't watching it, the playlists that are available in the contents and stuff have all been updated. That happened in April. So those are the things that have happened recently.
Awesome. We have a question from Anonymous. Do you consider the solution a learning management and LMS software?
Yep.
Have you faced pushback from IT when they have a formal LMS solution when introducing this one? I'll take the first shot, and then I'd love to have you add,
Yeah,
Julie.
this is absolutely not LMS, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I think it doesn't really have things like the reporting capabilities that I've seen a lot of LMSs need, although I have seen some where the LMS can't house the content itself, but they can have hyperlinks. So this could be a nice hybrid where the content itself lives on learning pathways, and then you're adding that link to the playlists or the different custom assets in your LMS itself, but I do consider them to be different.
For sure. I mean, I know people who want an LMS and don't have one. We've often mentioned that you could add a Microsoft form embedded on a page as the last page in your playlist to sort of collect some information, but it's not an official LMS. There is no reporting. We aren't not collecting metrics that are shareable. It is something that we think about, but it's not the intent for the solution to be an LMS.
And then for just circling back to language, I know we had a couple different questions on that. So multilingual is coming in version 4, as Julie mentioned. Julie, does that include French and Dutch?
French, yes. Dutch, darn good question. I can never remember the whole list. The list is Not Dutch. Yeah, so it's not Dutch because not all of the support .office.com content is available in Dutch. So Dutch is not in the first wave of languages. It's 8 languages: French, Portuguese, Chinese, Japanese, German. Well, I could look it up. It's also in our GitHub repo. If you search for multilingual, the question was answered, and so it's in the closed issues list. While you're answering more, I'll try to look it up over on the other side.
Awesome. So next one from Andrew McCallum. To what level is the training aimed at, i.e. user/tech level, as in standard Office user? So you can always change the content that you're adding there, and you have different roles that you could set it to. So you do have the capability to target your training to those various roles and hit them across those different levels. I'm scrolling down, there's a couple more. Does this include any way to track viewing? I think that's similar to our LMS conversation. Yep. So this would just include anything that's out of the box available in your audit logs. And then let's take a peek here. I noticed a tile that mentioned analytics. What analytics feature information is available within this solution? So again, I would say just the out of the box viewing of those pages. Is there anything additional that you have to add on that, Julie?
No, that's all there is. I did just post in the chat that I don't think people can see. So if you could move it to the Q&A answer thing, sure. The languages. So it was Chinese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish for the first release.
Awesome. And then we have one last question as I navigate between these two. Sorry, someone's at my door. Go figure the timing. Are there plans to add LMS capabilities in the future?
Again, the only thing that is maybe possible is to have some way to hook into what's happening so that you can then at least get the data. That was a conversation that we've had as a possible enhancement, but not full-blown. It will never be, it was never intended to be a full-blown LMS.
And then another one from Andrew. Do you know of a skill matrix you can recommend for Office 365? I do not, but that's a good question.
That is a really good question. I don't know that either. We could probably look around and see if we can find one, and we could tweet it if we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I know we want to leave a little bit of time for the next presenter. So thank you all for joining and asking us your questions. We hope this was helpful in starting your Learning Pathways journey. I wish that had it existed when I was a previous platform owner. It's incredibly helpful to have that central repository.
Thanks, everybody, for all the questions. That was wonderful. Awesome. Oh, I should probably, last but not least, move to the feedback page.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. Please,
and I did see one
feedback
in the chat. Good feedback. I can absolutely add slides in the future, reiterating the points that I verbally made. So thank you for that recommendation, Walt.
There you go. So you can use those to give us some feedback. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.